attend our webinar. I am Jenny Russo. I'm the Grants Program Manager here at SANDAG, and I'm going to get us started. So next slide, please. So just some quick housekeeping things. As you just heard, we are recording this workshop, and we're going to be posting both the recording and the slides on BidNet, so you don't need to try and capture notes feverishly or try and screenshot slides. So we'll save you that piece. You can just kind of kick back and listen. There is a chat feature that's enabled, so if you have questions as we go along the way, feel free to post some questions in the chat. We're going to answer as many questions today as we can live, but we're also going to be capturing all of those questions and pushing those out with the responses in BidNet. So if there's something that you missed, or if you have a colleague that wanted to attend and that couldn't, they'll be able to catch up to speed pretty quickly with all the stuff that we'll be posting. And then you can also use the raise hand feature when we get to the Q&A session a little bit later in the presentation. And we can promote, you can ask a question live, or if you have some comments for us. So with that, let's get started. So our agenda today, we're going to do a quick overview of the Smart Growth Incentive Program, if you're not familiar with it, and the program's objectives. Then we'll dive into the call for projects itself, going through eligibility, the criteria, the evaluation, and the funding recommendations, and how that whole process works. We're going to talk through the application submittal. So what do you need to submit? How do you do that? How to use BidNet, those sorts of things. And then we'll dive into Q&A for those of you that might have some questions for us. Next slide, please. So let me get us started on the Transnet program. The Transnet Smart Growth Incentive Program is funded exclusively by the Transnet Extension Ordinance, and it outlines this competitive grant program for us, which supports all of our local jurisdictions' efforts to increase biking, walking, and transit use throughout the San Diego region. The goals are to encourage local comprehensive public infrastructure projects and planning activities that facilitate compact, mixed-use development focused near public transit, and projects that help increase housing and transportation choice, reduce GHG emissions, and improve public health. Next slide. The program seeks to fund projects that serve as models around our region and attract private development. Projects funded by the program need to support the objectives that are outlined here on this slide, which are derived from the goals in our 2021 regional plan and the sustainable community strategy. So I'll go through these kind of quickly. First, we're looking to implement a comprehensive approach to influence land development by improving public realm and encouraging private smart growth projects that in combination create great places, advance mobility hub concepts, and leverage advanced technology. We want to serve as model examples for smart growth in a variety of settings throughout the region, contribute to reducing GHG emissions and vehicle miles traveled, and improve public health by encouraging travel by means other than single occupant vehicles. In particular, projects should support public transit use by improved access to transit and be located in areas that are served by transit. We're also looking to support future housing development, and we want to fund proposed capital projects that are ready to go and that can serve as catalysts for future smart growth development. Next slide. So we've held 5 prior cycles of the SGIP, beginning with the first cycle in 2009 and concluding with the most recent cycle, cycle 5 in 2022. The cycle numbers, the number of projects awarded in each cycle, and the award amounts are shown on the graph on the left side of the slide, demonstrating an overall investment of about $60 million to our region since the program began. The pie chart on the right shows that 79% of the funding, or about $47 million, has been awarded to capital projects, and 21%, or about $12 million, has been awarded to planning projects. Next slide. There have been more than 70 planning and capital projects awarded funding through the SGIP. The program's also been able to leverage an additional $47 million in other funding, representing a total of investment of over $100 million to our region. There's images on this slide from a few of our cities, such as Chula Vista, San Marcos, Lemon Grove, and San Diego. Other example projects include traffic calming infrastructure, pedestrian promenades, curb gutter and sidewalk improvements. Some planning projects funded in the past are developing innovative financing mechanisms, mixed use and commercial corridor plans, transit center connections, and complete street design manuals. Next slide. So this is the timeline for the entire call for projects. As you see, it kicked off last week with the release of the call for projects. Applications are due on April 11th. Then from April to May, we're going to be reviewing all the applications, going through the scoring with our outside panelists, and preparing those funding recommendations. In June and July, we'll be taking the funding recommendations to our Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, the Transportation Committee, and the Regional Planning Committee, and then ultimately for award by our Board of Directors. In October, we're anticipating having those grant agreements ready to go, be signed, and issue the notices proceed so you can get started on your projects. And those projects have either a 3-year or 3.5-year duration, so they'll be completed sometime in 2028 or 2029. And with that, I'll turn things over to Stacy to talk about the call for projects.
Morning, everyone. I'm Stacy Cooper. I'm a senior planner on the Sustainable Communities team, and I'm going to cover the call for projects. Next slide, please. So in this cycle, SANDAG is making $45 million in SGIP funding available for local jurisdictions for climate action plans and planning and capital projects. As shown in the pie chart, there's $3 million available for CAPs, $12 million for planning, and $30 million for capital. If there's leftover funding available from one category, we can utilize it to fund additional projects of another project type. Agencies can submit multiple applications for consideration, and Goldie will go over evaluation of those later. And the table on the right includes the minimum and maximum award sizes for each category, along with the performance period that's required under board policy. Next slide, please. So the project types eligible to receive funding this cycle are climate action plans, planning and capital. The CAP category was added to address mitigation measures in the 2021 Regional Plan EIR and can be used to prepare or update CAPs and GHG reduction plans. The planning category covers plans and processes that accelerate smart growth activities, but will not directly result in the construction of public improvement projects. The capital category is for projects that will eventually result in the construction of public improvements. Applications will be sorted into application categories for evaluation, so it's important to apply in the correct category. Applicants who fail to utilize the correct application type may be deemed non-responsive. So if you have any questions regarding the correct category, please feel free to reach out to us for technical assistance. We're happy to help. Next slide, please. So I just want to draw your attention to some key dates. March 28th is the last day to submit questions in BidNet and the last day to request one-on-one meetings with SANDAG grant staff. April 11th is the application deadline. 30 days later, May 11th is the deadline to submit your resolution. And in August, we plan to notify awarded applicants of our intents to award. And again, those dates are subject to change based on when we can get to ITALC, Regional Planning Committee, Transportation Committee, and the Board of Directors. Next slide, please. So moving on to eligibility requirements, eligible applicants include the 18 cities and the County of San Diego. Jurisdictions can opt to work together on an application to conduct eligible activities consistent with the goals and objectives of the program. Jurisdictions may also partner with community-based organizations or nonprofits providing services in the San Diego region. But applicants who form partnerships must provide a letter of support from each jurisdiction, CBO, or nonprofit that they decide to partner with. Next slide, please. On continuing with program eligibility. So previous SGIP cycles only funded projects within geographically restricted smart growth opportunity areas, or SGOAs, and the location and extent of SGOAs were defined in each regional plan. To provide greater flexibility and fewer restrictions on where SGIP funds can be invested, geographic boundaries have been removed from the eligibility criteria for this cycle. Instead, projects need to further smart growth principles and goals and objectives of the 2021 Regional Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. And in order to receive funding for planning or capital projects, the applicant must have an adapted climate action plan. If you do not have an adopted climate action plan, you can apply for the climate action plan category to receive funding to develop a CAP. Next slide, please. So application requirements. So everything that's due on April 11th is the application, the scope, schedule, and budget, and a map or a shapefile of the project area. And Lizzie will go into more detail on how to provide that later in the presentation. So within 30 days following the grant application deadline, you must submit the resolution from your authorized governing body that commits to providing the matching fund percentage included in your application and authorizes your staff to accept the grant funding and execute a grant agreement if an award is made by SANDAG. So now I'll pass it over to Goldie to cover the evaluation criteria, scoring procedures, and awarding.
Great. Thanks so much, Stacy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Goldie Herbon. I'm a Senior Grants Program Analyst here at SANDAG, and I support our grants distribution team. I'm also the Smart Growth Incentive Program Manager responsible for the day-to-day administration of the program. So I'm going to cover today the evaluation and funding recommendations. So the valuation criteria for the Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 call for project were reviewed by the regional planning and transportation committees and approved by our board of directors. All eligible project types will be scored based on the applicant's responses and how well they address criteria listed in their respective evaluation criteria tables. The tables on this slide are a summary of the evaluation criteria for planning and capital projects. The criteria for both are largely the same, with the exception of the addition of criteria 4A, major milestones completed for capital projects. This criteria provides points for projects that have made progress toward achieving capital project milestones, like planning, environmental review, right-of-way, and being ready to list for construction. Also new for the cycle is the criteria entitled efficient use of program funds. This new criterion is added to both of these tables, and they evaluate a project scope, schedule, and budget, and more points will be awarded to projects that clearly demonstrate how they will efficiently use SGIP funding. I also want to highlight the scoring rubric, which is located in our call for projects. This is an important tool for both staff and evaluators when looking at whether an applicant fulfilled criteria and for applicants to use to reference when they're working on their applications. So the rubric is a guide that staff and evaluators use to award points based on the evaluation criteria. We highly encourage applicants to use this when answering questions on the project proposal, and you will want to ask yourself if you're answering these questions in your narrative responses in your application. You'll find the complete scoring rubric in the final call for projects toward the end, and you can access this via BidNet. The maximum amount of points an application can receive is 100 points, and the percentage breakdown are presented here. And typically for each criteria, there's a range of points available for each criteria. And, the quality is like low, medium, high generally. And there's a definition for those types of responses in each range category. I also want to spotlight that there are two types of criteria: qualitative and quantitative criteria. Qualitative points will be assessed by an evaluation panel, while quantitative points are calculated by SANDAG's Department of Data Science and grant staff. The quantitative criteria are marked here on this slide by an asterisk, and I'll talk about more about these types of criteria in an upcoming slide. So this is a third evaluation criteria table for the final project type, climate action planning projects. So this is formatted a little bit differently than the first two that I mentioned. And as we talked about, as Stacy alluded to earlier, SANDAG requires that local jurisdictions have an adopted climate action plan in order to receive Smart Growth Incentive Program grant funding. For any agency, however, who has yet to adopt a climate action plan and needs funding to develop one, an agency would be evaluated under criteria 1 on this table, and eligible activities besides developing a CAP or updating a CAP itself under this category could also include a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, a greenhouse gas emissions forecast or reduction target projects, or greenhouse gas reduction measure projects. For agencies already have an updated CAP but are seeking funding for implementation and monitoring activities, those types of projects would be evaluated under evaluation criteria number 2 on this table, implementation and monitoring. And any new CAPs or CAP update projects can also receive points for this category if they include implementation and monitoring activities. Any planning or capital projects that come out of a CAP would apply for funding within the planning and capital project type category. So once applications have been received and downloaded, SANDAG staff move forward with the application evaluation and award process, and the steps are highlighted here on the slide. So we'll go over them quickly. Responsiveness review. SANDAG grant staff reviews submitted applications to ensure that they are responsive to the requirements outlined in the call for projects. And if an application is deemed non-responsive, SANDAG staff will notify the applicant in writing for an opportunity to respond. The eligibility screening, following the application submittal period and concurrently with the responsiveness review, SANDAG staff will perform an eligibility screening of all submitted applications. And eligibility screening involves verifying that an applicant and their proposed project meet the eligibility requirements included in the call for projects. Eligible projects will be scored using, again, the qualitative and quantitative criteria approved by the SANDAG board and included in the call for projects. There are 3 sets of scoring criteria, which I just went over: the capital planning and climate action planning evaluation criteria. And then finally, grant agreement and execution. After scoring, ranking, and recommending awards, if approved by the board, we move forward with grant agreement execution. So moving on to scoring and awarding funding, eligible projects will be scored using the qualitative and quantitative criteria approved by the board. Quantitative scoring, for quantitative scoring, an external evaluation panel will provide the qualitative criteria scores for eligible applications. The evaluation panel will typically consist of at least 3, but not more than 5 public members who are familiar with the San Diego region and the grant program goals and objectives. For qualitative scoring, SANDAG grants and data science staff will provide the quantitative criteria scores for each project. Points associated with the quantitative criteria undergo a quality assurance and quality control review to ensure that the data used in the quantitative scoring process are accurate and points were awarded appropriately. An application's average qualitative score will be calculated by summing an evaluator's score for that application and dividing by the number of evaluators. The application's average qualitative score will then be added to the quantitative scores, producing a total application score. Following the scoring process, applications in each project type will be placed in descending total application score order from highest to lowest. For each project type, the applications will be recommended to receive funding in descending total application score order until all applicants with the applications receiving more than 50 points or higher have received funding for at least one project or funding is exhausted, whichever comes first. If funding remains, additional applications will be recommended to receive funding in descending total application score order until funding is exhausted. And finally, SANDAG will recommend a list of projects to the board of directors that are within the financially constrained amount available for this cycle. Now moving on to the application submittal. SANDAG has a procurement platform and vendor portal called BidNet Direct. To receive notifications of current and upcoming grant solicitations, you're required to register via BidNet. The general steps that you will need to take will be registering, activating your account, and logging into BidNet and searching for FY 2024 Transnet Smart Growth Incentive Program. For details on registering for BidNet, you can go to sandag.org/grants and click on BidNet registration guide under resources at the bottom right of the webpage. Then following the instructions to complete your registration, there's a more detailed information, including making changes to your account and what to do if your organization already exists as a vendor and how to get support for troubleshooting any BidNet issues in that document. You will also, as a reference, you can go on bidnetdirect.com/sandag -grants to register. And once you're on the SANDAG grant BidNet opportunities, you'll find this solicitation at the top of the list because it's been our latest one. And there's a register now button on the top right side for reference. So now I'll turn it over to Lizzie to go over mapping requirements.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lizzie Havey. I'm a regional planner on the Sustainable Communities team. Mapping is a requirement of the application. I'm going to show you a couple different ways and what you can do and kind of go through a demo of a tool we created for you all too. So one moment as I share my screen. Okay, can you see that, Goldie?
Yeah, it's up now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we created this tool that can allow applicants to look at their project location in relation to different data. The layers on the map correspond to various application questions, namely for the planning and capital categories, where you'll receive points if the project area includes or is within a number of these layers, again, that you see on the right here. Use this tool to interact with your project area and the map, but if you do not have a shapefile of your project area, you will have to attach PDFs using this tool, demonstrating where your project is in relation to a number of these layers. What I'm noticing from this morning is that some of these layers that are supposed to be on this list, we need to add a few more that aren't there as of, again, this morning. So we'll work with our GIS team, but there's just a few more. So for example, if your project, let's just use downtown San Diego, for example, and say it's a limited area, so not just the entire jurisdiction, so perhaps the capital or, a corridor plan, you could draw this using the tools that we just showed there. And then you can see, how does this interact with maybe one of the major transit stops? So we can go ahead and click that, and you'll see that there's a couple major transit stops in that area. What I want to point out is there's a number of these tools where it's a point layer. So, something that's a point on the map and then a buffer around that area. So for the transit priority area, that's going to be the buffer of the major transit stop. It doesn't specifically say that, but you can see that, and they are all clipped together. So then from this point, you would go ahead, exit out. You have the data layer here. You would then go to the print feature and you would act to print it, but really you would save as a PDF. And that's essentially how it would go with attaching each of these layers to the corresponding application question. So in the application, both the planning and capital, namely, it goes into great detail of which ones we're looking for. If you provide a shapefile, you do not have to do this. So if there's any questions, I'll talk about this shortly, but we can definitely talk more about this in these one-on-one sessions that we're doing. And I'll jump back to the PowerPoint. Ooh, I'm gonna have to skip ahead. Don't mind me. We're coming up to the end of the PowerPoint anyway, and so if you all want to start facilitating questions in the chat, feel free to do so, and then we can get to there. Sorry, I don't know how to do this in a faster way. Okay. One additional resource that we want to offer is the Sustainable Communities on Call. We did this with our Housing Acceleration Program grants. This is also available outside of SANDAG grants. So if any of the applicants have any planning projects that can fit within our on-call, which is essentially a bench of consultants that have already been pre-approved and gone through the procurement processes, you are welcome to use these on-calls. Just make sure that it does fit your different procurement processes that you need within your city. However, this is something that you can use. There's a variety of available planning services in these 6 categories that highly relate to the Smart Growth Incentive Program: land use and urban design, community development finance, equity, grant writing. So again, this is a tool to your disposal The one note is that this does conclude in 2027. So I just recommend having a conversation with us and looking at your scope, schedule, budget, especially your schedule. If this is a project that can close prior to 2027, we can work with you. If not, most of the SCEP projects are looking to close closer to 2028. So again, for any questions regarding the on-call, you can reach out to us in those one-on-one sessions or directly to the emails that we have here too. And the process to do that is really simple. You can request authorization from SANDAG via email, including the summary, the scope, the budget. And then once authorized for us, which really is us making sure that that project fits the different criterias of the on-call, then you would want to tell us, basically submit those proposals to the different firms and then let us know which one that you do choose, and confirming again the scope, schedule, budget. We do need to keep track of that different information. So again, this is a resource that's to your guys' use. We really want you all to come and meet with us. We would love anybody who's submitting an application to schedule a one-on-one meeting with us. We'll be able to walk through any of your questions. Is this a good project idea? Does this fit the Smart Growth Incentive Program? Any specific application questions, and nothing is too big or too small. So we really highly recommend reaching out to us for setting up a one-on-one call during this application period for Smart Growth. And then lastly, some important dates to remember. The deadline to request a meeting with us is the March 28th, 2025. That'll be also the last time to submit official question. So we'll be submitting questions. You'll be able to submit questions to us, and we'll be posting those all to BidNet to make sure that's transparent to everybody and people can see the different types of questions other people are asking. So the deadline for the question submission is also March 28th. And then we'll post all responses in BidNet, of course, April 4th. And then the application deadline is April 11th. And then the deadline to submit the resolution is May 11th. And with that, open to any questions. Goldie, I think we can facilitate some questions that come in the chat.
Yeah.
We also recommend people to raise their hand.
I just have a quick comment real quick. While March 28th is the deadline to request one-on-one meetings, we do not recommend that you wait that long considering the applications are due on the 11th. So we recommend you setting up meetings sooner rather than later. That's the ultimate date to request those meetings. But to give you enough time to actually complete your application and move forward with that, we recommend doing that much earlier.
Thanks, Stacy. All right, we have an email from, or a chat question from Angelita from National City. Will you please go back to the last slide you showed? We just go back one. Thank you. Angelita, feel free to post a question or unmute yourself and ask your question if you have one. While people are thinking, though, I also want to highlight that you can access all of the Call for Projects documents only via BidNet. So you need to register and download all the documents there, including the application templates. And all questions need to go through BidNet as well, for transparency's sake. And then responses and answers will be posted on BidNet. So please check BidNet regularly. Although if you register and download the documents, you'll get all notifications related to the solicitation. And you must also submit your application via BidNet as well. Applications will not be accepted, sent to us in any other form, like email. But I do want to differentiate that we do accept, your resolutions have to be emailed to us, but your applications have to be submitted on BidNet.
I was just going to highlight the resolution deadline on here for all of you. I know getting on your council agendas is tough. Please, 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 if you're thinking about submitting, start working on that now. That is not a date that we can waive. It's set by board policy. So if somebody does not submit a resolution by that deadline, the policy says your application is non-responsive. And I don't think anybody wants to do that because we know there's a lot of work that goes into these. So please be mindful of that deadline because that's not something at the staff level that we can waive. If you think it's going to be a problem, or for those of you that have blanket resolutions, there's a couple of you that do, please reach out to us on those so we can go through them and make sure that they meet the requirements that's in the resolution. It's stipulated in the policy what has to be in there. So just please be, of all of the deadlines that are on here, that is the one that I'm the most nervous about because we don't have any ability to do anything with it. So just keep that in mind. I know it's not that far away and it takes a bit for you to get on your agendas.
All right, we have a question from Victor. Does SANDAG have templates of what the resolution should look like? Yes, there's a resolution template in the documents on the call for projects. So you can access that on BidNet, Victor. Jasmine asks, can you go back to the timeline slide from the beginning of the presentation? I think that was the one that Stacy presented, the bigger overall one. From Matthew Anderson, are proposal scores ranked for each category or all together? If we submit multiple proposals in different categories, how would those be prioritized against each other? Matthew, yes, projects will be ranked by category. So they won't be ranked against one another, and then there'll be a ranking list or priority list for each project category.
Jasmine, is this the timeline that you were looking for, or was it the one that was shown earlier on when Jenny was presenting? Cool.
Wendy Wang asks, can you please describe the typical or ideal planning non-cap projects for this program? Typical, ideal, let's see. A lot of planning projects I see are related to general plans or specific plans, environmental studies. I was going to say design work, but that's considered capital. Yeah, typically studies, feasibility studies, that type of project. Any other thoughts, Lizzie, Jenny?
Yeah. A lot of times we do see, yeah, kind of corridor specific plans. Maybe that's, you know, whether that's proposing projects in the corridor or doing like environmental clearance for that whole corridor for higher density. That could be an idea. You know, comprehensive updates to the general plan where it's like looking at both zoning as well as the land use element, as you know, kind of coupling those things together to really bring like a suite of things to a council for a number of updates. I think those are type of things that we see under planning. Usually with planning, and if it's towards, you know, more of those kind of broader jurisdiction wide or kind of corridor specific, anything that's related to a specific project should usually go under capital. But we can still fund really early stages of those projects. If it's a little bit more conceptual or design, or even kind of a step before that, if it's like project identification, that could be something that could be funded under planning that relates to, you know, whether that's active transportation, parking mitigation, things like that are also things that we've seen in the past.
Thanks, Lizzie. Audrey asks, if a jurisdiction is submitting multiple applications, can a jurisdiction submit a single resolution for all applications? I believe this is yes, but Jenny, can you confirm?
Yes, you can do that. You can consolidate them or you can split them, whatever is easier as long as it has the content that's on there.
Yep.
And I believe the template is set up that way for a bundle, but you don't have to do it that way if it's too complicated.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, Victor asks, if a project is receiving grants from other sources, can we still apply for this opportunity? Yes, you can, and you're free to present those other funding sources as match as well, if applicable.
The only caveat to that is if your project's fully funded, you cannot use Transnet dollars to supplant. So if you've got a project that's already covered by another grant and you're thinking you can use this money to replace that and free up that grant for something else, you cannot do that. That's not allowable under Transnet.
Thank you. Wendy Wang asks, are there minimum maxing funding requests? Yes, can you go to that call for project slide? Wendy, there are minimum and maximum thresholds for each project category type. Lizzie's going to go to the screen here, but it is also detailed in our call for projects. Let's see. So for climate action planning, the minimum project award is 150,000 and the maximum is 400,000. For planning, it's 150,000 minimum with a maximum threshold of 1 million. And then finally for capital projects, the minimum is 500,000 and the maximum is 3.5 million. And just to note here, while we're talking about it, the performance period for planning and CAP projects are 3 years and capital projects is 3.5 years. Alexa Kerr asked, could you discuss further how scoring criteria changed from cycle 5 to cycle 6? Cycle 5 was planning only, right, Jenny? Is that? Yeah.
Yes.
So we had to add 2 new evaluation criteria scoring rubrics for capital or climate action plans and capital, but they mirror very much what we've awarded in the past for capital and planning projects. I went over a couple of like the new ones, which is the major milestones completed is a new evaluation criteria introduced for this cycle, and the efficient use of program funds, because we want to see more robust and detailed scope schedule budgets than we have in the past. So we added those to address that concern, and also we've amended our schedule scope budget templates to get to that, to address that issue as well.
And building on what Goldie said, we've heard from the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, so ITALC and Transportation Committee, that they wanted to see more robust, scope schedules and budgets for these projects. So that is a major change for the efficient use of program funds. So I would say that's kind of the biggest. The other one is Board Policy 33 from cycle, it hasn't changed since cycle 5. It has changed since cycle 4. That's another change, but overall, like the whole concept of the program remains unchanged. There's just some nuances to the scoring rubric.
One of the biggest tasks for the cycle 6 was really aligning it with the 2021 regional plan. So a lot of some of the changes too is, verbiage, wording, but again, the concept remains the same, but you'll see how in the evaluation criteria aligns a little bit more with the 2021 regional plan.
Caitlin asks, for capital projects, is there more information about examples of equivalent project feasibility evaluations? Not sure I'm following what that's in reference to. Caitlin, do you mind hopping on to clarify?
I think this is in our rubric. And so it's looking for what foundational documents are out there that drove the need for the capital project. So it could be a planning study, it could be a feasibility study, anything like that, basically like the groundwork that caused the capital project to come about. That's what we're looking for. And it can be all sorts of different things, but some sort of foundational document that led to it.
All right, from Crystal. Could a microtransit program be eligible? I ask because it does not seem to exactly fit the definition of a capital project, i.e. construction of public improvements.
I think if you're asking about service, then the answer is no. The program is not intended to fund service. But we are working on a call for projects for flexible fleets that will fund microtransit. That one's still in the development stage, but it's going to be coming up through our working groups in February and March. And we think it will come out sometime in April. That would be a more appropriate place to fund something for microtransit. That said, if you have supportive infrastructure that needs to be in play, it may qualify under here. It just sort of depends on what you're thinking. That would be a good one to do a one-on-one with us, so we can kind of walk through what the project is. There may be a way to kind of strip it out, or it may be something that's better suited to hang on to until we have our flexible fleets call.
Thanks, Jenny. From Hillary, for the CAP category, is the implementation and or monitoring of an existing CAP subtype for implementation projects or only for an implementation plan? I'm not sure I'm understanding this. Maybe Susan can chime in if is it for-
Sure. It's an implementation or monitoring plan of the CAP. So if you were looking to implement CAP measure, that would need to fall under the planning category or the capital projects category. But this is for if there's things like you adopted a climate action plan, but you didn't have really an implementation plan tied to that to show performance monitoring of the plan, things like that. That's what the category and the CAP, the subcategory in the CAP area falls for, or covers. Yeah, Hillary's good with that one.
Thanks.
If it's a project, it's in the capital or planning categories.
Appreciate you hopping on, Susan. Thank you. Matthew says, the call for project states that other Transnet funds cannot be used as match. Does that mean that we cannot combine those funds, or just that we won't get match points for other Transnet funds?
It means that you don't get points for it, but you can certainly use them to contribute to your project overall and help get your costs down. It just doesn't work for points.
Oh, thanks for typing that in the chat, Stacy. Okay, what percentage of matching funds is required? Well, firstly, matching funds is not required, but you do get some points for them. So there isn't a requirement for match, but it does allow you to get more points. Let's see. Oh, thank you. Stacy's typing in. I'm a little behind here on these chats.
No, no worries. I'm just
Okay, thank you.
to answer.
All right. Okay. Yeah,
And
that's it.
again, match can be cash or in kind, but sort of new for this round and was decided by our policy advisory committees and ITALK is that Transnet funds cannot be used as match for other Transnet funds.
And then across all the categories for points, matching funds is only worth 5% of the total points of the evaluation criteria.
Could you go back to the slide for eligibility criteria, please? Alexa, for capital and planning or CAP eligibility criteria?
Goldie, I think back a few, I think to eligibility, not evaluation.
Oh, yes. Okay. The one that you did, the ones that you did. Yeah.
Which one is it?
Eligibility criteria. Stacy's section?
Should be slide 15.
15.
So there were two slides. The first one was the eligible applicants are the 18 cities in the county of San Diego. So that's sort of the main one. And then there's the next one that says you have to have an adopted CAP. If you don't, you can apply for the CAP pot of funding. And then the big change from previous cycles is that we no longer have to have a project in a certain area, but it has to fulfill the goals of the Smart Growth Program and align with the 2021 Regional Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy.
Okay, great. Victor asked, do you have a recommendation on the percent of funds allocated for matching to get the full 5% and or points for that category? This is detailed in the scoring rubric. I'm pulling it up now. And it's 20 to 25% match as compared to the total project cost to receive the 5 points out of 5 on that category, Victor. And it's on page 36 of the call for projects if you want to reference that. I think it's referenced multiple times, but it's definitely on page 36. Any other questions? From David. Could you define what ready to go means in reference to capital projects, specifically if design work is needed? Ready to go means ready to construct. So design, 100% design is completed. So ready to construct, ready to list for construction.
But it doesn't mean that to qualify for a capital project, you have to have design complete. So the capital category can fund any phase of a capital project. So it can fund design, it can fund, engineering right of way, any of those things, permits that you might need. So you don't have to have it shovel ready. That said, if you have a project that's just waiting on funding and it's pretty much ready to go to be constructed, to turn dirt, then yes, those will score better in that section of the criteria, but you don't have to have something that is shovel ready. You can certainly be at the early stages looking for funding for design work or the earlier stages of a capital project, and that still works.
And then in the call for projects, I think on page 30, it kind of details like the points for like the major milestones completed for the capital section too. I can put that in the chat as well.
Where can we find the GIS layers needed for mapping requirements? Is this link in the call for projects? When will the additional layers mentioned be added?
So there's a link to it in each of the applications sections. When you open up the application that has all the questions, when you get to the questions that talk about it, there's a link that takes you over to the tool. I think it's also linked in the call for projects as well. And GIS can fix the layers. It just looks like they disappeared on us somewhere in the last maybe couple of days. So we'll probably have that updated and fixed sometime this week.
Thanks, Jenny.
And again, if you provide a shaped file, you do not need to provide the PDFs of those of your project, the screenshots of your project and the locations. And I just put in a link to the map that's also included, again, as Jenny mentioned, the call for projects in each of the applications.
Just for fun, I'm going to read a question that was posted on BidNet, which I answered already, but the question is, can an organization submit more than one application? For example, one planning application, one capital application, and the answer is yes. Applicants can submit multiple applications under each project type, just for reference. Just to confirm, if we have a project boundary shapefile, we do not need to create the map. We just submit the shapefile with the application. You're correct.
Yes, that's correct. And then it's more so, and if you have a project shapefile, it could be helpful just to kind of look at the map and seeing how it relates to maybe our mobility hub layer or the safety focus network, which are areas you can get points for. But again, all that's required is submitting the shapefile.
Any other questions?
If these come to you later, please post them on BidNet. Happy to answer them. And we will post this recording on BidNet shortly.
And again, we are offering one-on-one consultations with the local jurisdictions. The deadline is March 28th, but we highly recommend that you do not wait until then to set one of those up.
Great.
All right. Thank you, everyone.